And the way that you've approached the design of the Tesla cars, the way you've approached the theoretical plan for a Hyperloop at some point, safety has always been baked in as a core principle of what you've done. So it's consistent.
Yeah, I think certainly, I think safety is really important.
Right.
You know, I think it's particularly important when there's the potential for mass destruction.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think AI is something that is risky at the civilization level, not merely at the individual risk level.
Right.
And that's why it really demands a lot of safety research. That's what. So I've committed to fund $10 million worth of AI safety research. AI safety research, yeah. Right. And I'll probably do more. Actually, I think that's just the beginning.
That's the beginning. Let me ask you directly about Texas. The fact that you're in Texas is no accident. You were here during the
Texas?
Say again? It is Texas, yes. I can confirm that it's Texas. You were around during the 2013 legislative session. Your lobby team, large in number, was around the Capitol attempting, unsuccessfully it turned out last time, to try to get permission for Tesla to sell cars directly to customers in the state of Texas. You said at the time that you'd be back, that the political realities are sometimes it takes 3 times before...
I hope it's only twice.
You hope it's only twice, right. Well, see you next time provisionally, but let's see if you can get it done this time. Would you talk about the issue, the political and policy issues at the center of this fight? It sounds that in a state that is so good with free enterprise, liberty, we want to give everybody the right to do what they want without the giant boot of government coming down on their heads.
Sure.
That this sounds like something that ought to be a no-brainer, but the automobile dealers and their team has a different point of view about this. So talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, all we're saying at Tesla is that we want to be able to sell our cars direct to consumers in Texas.
Right.
And I think this is actually directly in line with the ethos of Texas. In fact, restricting what consumers can do in terms of buying direct is extremely un-Texan.
Right.
It's very weird that it even exists. I mean, if you think of something like Michael Dell's company, Dell Direct. Dell started his computer company in Texas selling direct to consumers.
Right.
If the same laws had existed for computers as exist for cars, then Dell wouldn't exist.
Right.
Or it would be in some other state.
Yeah.
So it really, I think there's something on the books that most Texans aren't even aware of that is fundamentally un-Texan and needs to be changed.
And the restriction relates to the model for selling cars that exists in Texas today. You have to go through kind of a franchise dealership model. That is the law on the books right now.
Yeah, the law currently says that in order to sell a car in Texas, you have to sell through a franchise dealer.
Right.
But this exists only for alcohol and cars, which is weird.
Right. Maybe you can fix that booze problem next, actually.
I mean, probably that shouldn't exist either,
guy.
But it's just weird that it's cars. Like what the...
Right.
You know, and we can sell direct in every other country in the world.
Right.
And in all of we can sell direct in every state in the United States except for about half a dozen.
Yeah.
So it's just, we're just asking for essentially a modification of the law to allow us to sell direct to consumers. And
is it competition, Mr. Musk? Is that what has the opponents of this plan tied up in knots? Competition? They don't want you in taking away some of their business. As I understand the numbers right now, don't your sales in Texas represent 0.1% of the total number of cars that are sold in Texas?
Yeah, I don't think we're like a huge threat to the car dealers.
Right. But of course, if you were permitted to sell cars directly, you presumably would grow those numbers to some degree.
Yeah, we might grow them from 0.1 to 1% perhaps, or 2%.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I think is fundamentally a threat to the car dealers. And the problem is that the incumbent car dealers have a conflict of interest. They make all their money from selling gasoline cars.
Right.
For them to then tout the advantages of an electric car, when most of their money is coming from gasoline cars.
They're undercutting their own deal.
It's a conflict of interest.
Right.
They're not going to do that.
Right.
So if we were to go through them, we
Right.
would fail.
But of course, many of the traditional automobile dealers and auto companies are themselves getting into the business of electric vehicles.
Yeah,
Right?
but they always sell them very, very. I mean, the electric car sales in the United States are very low.
Right.
I mean, and it's.
But you're betting on the future, Mr. Musk, and there are obviously things that have to happen in order to enable the electric car sector to grow. There has to be adequate infrastructure, which
Sure.
doesn't always is not always in the control of the car companies themselves. There's got to be, working with government, working with local communities, being sure that we have the infrastructure that we need to support this emerging sector. But the reality is, if the auto companies or the auto dealers see that there is growth potential, they will get into this business in a much bigger way.
In the long term, yes, and we've actually struck compromises in a number of other states where we've been allowed to open. Let's say take the state of New York, for example. We're allowed to have up to 5 stores
Right.
in the state of New York. So if we were to do something like that proportion in Texas, maybe we'd have like this. Texas, the biggest state, sort of 7 stores.
Right.
And let's say after 7 stores, at that point, we'd have to go to franchise or something like that.
So you'd be willing to entertain some modest
We've
presence
done that.
to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you indicated actually at the Detroit Auto Show this week that you would be willing at some point down the road to consider a more traditional franchise dealership structure if it came to that.
We'd certainly consider that down the road.
Right.
But I can certainly say, like, anyone who's been a huge jerk to us thus far is not going to be one of those
So jerks
entities.
need not apply, right?
No,
That's
I mean,
how
if
this
they've
goes.
been punching us in the face, they shouldn't expect that we're going to be their friend.
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you about that question of adequate infrastructure. This came up in a weird way, a misperception of the Tesla situation in China, where you all reported, and in fact, I think you specifically revealed at the Detroit Auto Show that fourth quarter sales of Teslas in China were not where they had hoped to be, where you had hoped them to be. And there was some question about whether on the China end of this conversation, they thought, well, you really don't have charging capacity that's adequate to make this go. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I want to understand in this country if we have a similar misperception of what's required to make this model car work.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a couple points that are worth clarifying. For Tesla, sales and demand are 2 different things, because the way that sales is measured is in terms of deliveries.
Right.
Whereas for the rest of the car industry, because the cars aren't ordered in advance, sales. Demand and deliveries are the same thing, because their cars are out on the lot, and they're not built to order.
Right.
They're out on the lot.
Right.
So it's extremely common for people to misunderstand demand and sales for Tesla. Sales for us or the sort of technical accounting definition of sales is how many cars did we deliver.
Right.
But the measure of demand is how many cars have been ordered.
Correct.
So we have far more cars ordered than we can deliver right now. Now we're trying to solve that problem by ramping up our production.
So increasing production would address that in part.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is important to note that the demand for our cars significantly exceeds our production capacity currently.
So when people say, well, he only sold 33,000 cars in 2014, less than he predicted, or he won't reveal his monthly sales numbers because he says they'd be misleading, this is what you're talking about.
Yes, I mean, maybe at some point this will become clear, but because Tesla is like a different animal than the rest of the car industry,
Right.
The numbers mean different things.
It's not apples to apples.
Correct. People look at our deliveries or sales and take that as a proxy for demand.
Right.
Whereas the actual proxy for demand is how many unfulfilled orders do we have.
Right.
It's more like the aircraft business, where they'll have an order backlog.
Indeed.
I mean, right now, the wait time for a Tesla, if you order one, is anywhere from 3 to 5 months.
3 to 5 months.
Yes.
Right. And ideally, it would be with all adequate facilities in place. You'd like it to be what?
a month.
A month.
You
So
know,
the goal
or less.
Is, goal
Like,
is to cut it down. Goal is to cut it down.
yeah, if we can get it down to
Right.
like low single-digit weeks, I think that's ideal.
Right. Let me ask you about one aspect of this model and the cost of a car and where those dollars go that are of particular interest to Texas right now. We are engaged in an enormous conversation about funding of transportation. Well, people who buy gasoline-powered cars, in doing so, or use gasoline-powered cars, indirectly contribute to the state budget in ways that we really need. And in fact, we're constantly looking for more money for transportation, more money for... If you have an electric-powered as opposed to a gasoline-powered car, how will your customers contribute from a revenue standpoint to the Texas budget, to education, to roads?
Sure.
Where are you all going to put in your table stakes to contribute to the economy of Texas?
Well, I mean, there's certainly taxes on electricity generation. There's registration fees and that kind of thing.
Right.
But
you're not paying gas taxes.
Well, no.
Drivers of your cars will
car.
not pay gas taxes, and therefore the revenues available to Texans through the state budget generated by gas taxes will not come from Tesla customers.
I mean, gas taxes can be very high because the price of gas in Texas is real low.
Right. Well, it is right now. Don't bum us out. It'll get back. It'll be okay. It'll be better.
It's like super cheap.
Right. But the point is, you don't think that electric car customers should have to figure out a way to contribute their share as gasoline car customers do through...
Yeah, no, sure they should. I mean, maybe there should be, at some point, some increased tax on electric cars or something like
Right.
that to match that of
Right.
gasoline cars. And,
Right.
you know, I can't imagine, like I said, that there's very much revenue generated
Right.
from taxes on gasoline given the low price of gasoline.
Now, you're going to be putting a fairly heavy lobbying effort in place to get this legislation done up this session. You've got a bunch of Tesla cars now actually out by the Capitol today as a demonstration.
Yeah.
You're going to have meetings today up at the Capitol, and you intend to really put on a full court press to get this done. What's it going to take? What will be different this time than last time?
Well, I think there's a lot more awareness. There actually are a lot of Tesla customers in Texas.
Again, 1,500 cars sold in Texas last
Yeah,
year,
yeah.
right? So not all that many. Our
No,
voter
but-
turnout is bad, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, but still,
Right.
there's a lot of supporters. And I think there's a lot more awareness in the Texas state legislature this time than there was last time.
Right.
Now, we are being out-lobbied by the Car Dealers Association by probably 10 to 1.
Well, that's another reality of life in Texas is he who has the biggest lobby team wins, right? That's it.
Well, I certainly hope not.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of crazy. The Texas Auto Dealers Association has really pulled out all the stops.
Right.
That they've said they'll spend whatever it takes
Yeah.
to win. I think they're outspending us at least 10 to 1, maybe
Yeah.
more. But I mean, but at the end of the day, I think we have the people of Texas on our side.
Yeah.
And because all we're trying to do is give people in Texas the right to choose how they buy their car. Why should they be denied that right?
Now, didn't you say to me earlier in this conversation, we don't want to do business with jerks?
Who does?
Right. Well, so I'm wondering, well, in my business, sadly, it's occasionally necessary.
Much unfortunate.
Right. But my question is, you made the decision to locate your battery plant in Nevada and not Texas. Some people perceive that to be you saying, well, if they're not going to change the laws to accommodate my direct sales model, I'm not going to do business with the jerk that is the state of Texas. I'm going to take my battery plant to Nevada. Is that what happened? Was this punishment?
It wasn't punishment. It certainly wasn't helpful. But it wasn't punishment, no.
Right, yeah.
We are actually still strongly considering the long term, and please I hope this doesn't become some big news article, but we are considering in the long term, future vehicle and battery plants.
Right.
And Texas would certainly be a strong contender for
You've
one of
already
those.
got a presence in McGregor and Waco, a company, I guess it's more SpaceX than Tesla, right? But you have,
Yeah.
you're already doing business in one part of the state. You obviously have the Boca, to switch over to the SpaceX stuff, you've got the Boca Chica facility now, the rocket facility down there in the valley. So you actually are doing business in Texas despite your issues with the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing business in Texas for 13 years.
Right.
So that's 13 years ago is when we established the rocket development facility in McGregor,
Right.
Near Waco, and that's worked out really well for us. It's the most advanced rocket development facility in the world
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
So I think people in Texas should be very proud of that. And then we're establishing the first commercial orbital launch site in the world at Boca Chica near Brownsville.
Right.
So I think, I mean, I love Texas. You know, come here a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, so yeah, I'm certainly, you know, big fan.
Can I ask you about the rocket facility in the valley?
Sure.
You just actually had a launch within the last little while, right?
Yeah.
And it was perceived to be not successful because of the way the rocket landed, but the reality is the mission was really to deliver goods north, and that actually was a success, right? You were generally happy with the test?
Yeah, I think within the space community, certainly it was, I think, quite well understood. The mission was completely successful in delivering cargo to the space station, which was
Right.
the primary mission. And I would consider it partly successful in trying to do something which has never been attempted before, which is to land a rocket stage successfully, to actually land a rocket stage successfully, because every other rocket in the world, the rocket stages basically smash into the atmosphere, explode, and then further explode when they hit the ocean,
Right.
or in, you know, the steppes of Kazakhstan or something like that. So that's what the Russians rockets. There's a whole
Right.
there's a whole industry collecting rocket parts, by the way, out there in Kazakhstan.
It's always Kazakhstan too, right?
Well, yeah, no, they have a launch site in Plesetsk as well, you know, basically the Siberian steppes collectively.
Right.
But the, you know, all the other, like the European rockets and the Boeing and Lockheed rockets, all of their stages basically just smash to bits and land. They're somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. So what we were trying to do was to land our rocket stage, but it's a very difficult thing because this thing's coming in from hypersonic velocity. It's got to do multiple relights of the main engine. It's got attitude control thrusters. It's got slosh baffles. It's got you know, so, and then it's got these hypersonic grid fins.
Right.
This is extremely difficult.
And the point of this, you want to reuse reuse rockets or parts or what have you. You talked about the importance to be sustainable and to actually not have to consistently redo equipment for these launches. And I suspect that was at least one goal you had in trying to land this thing safely, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the sort of rocket industry, this is considered kind of crazy. So, and like, you know, very unlikely to succeed.
Right.
I certainly agree with the very unlikely to succeed,
Right.
you know, thing. But as it turns out, we were able to actually hit the drone ship. You know, it was a sort of a higher velocity
Bumpy landing.
than
Right, yeah.
yeah. It's what we call a RUD, as a rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Right.
So
I like your acronym. It almost sounds good, actually. Right, yeah.
it's a technical term.
Yeah, right. Well, you're pretty chill about it. I think that's good.
Yeah, but I think we've got a decent chance of landing it intact on one of the later missions this year. So
And you're going to try again soon, right?
yeah, in about 3 or 4 weeks, we've got another flight.
Yeah, good.
So now this is actually, it's a tougher reentry condition. Like it's coming in hotter and faster than the last flight. So
Right.
so that does throw a little bit more of a, makes it a little trickier.
Yeah.
But we've got 50% more hydraulic fluid, which was we ran out of hydraulic fluid last time. So I think we shouldn't, if we may fail the landing again, but hopefully for a different reason.
But the point is, you're trying again. You're not particularly put off by the first result, and let's see what happens.
I expected it to fail.
You did. You
Yeah.
expected it to fail. You went into it thinking it might fail.
Yeah, no, I said I think we've got at best a 50% chance.
Wow.
And even that, I said I'm
Right.
kind of making that up. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I don't really know.
Yeah. Pretty good. Yeah. Good guess. We're going to have to go to questions, Mr. Musk, because we started a little late, and I've got some Twitter questions here that I'll be asking from the stage. But I want to ask you something as it relates to the Boca Chica facility. We are at the beginning of a legislative session, and there are many issues before people in this room. And one of them relates to business incentives, economic incentives offered to businesses to locate in Texas. This has been a hallmark of the Perry era, now about to end, as governor. He's been very successful in growing the economy, in part by luring businesses here, and there have been economic incentive funds that have done so. You received more than $15 million from the state and another $5 million from the city of Brownsville or from a city organization.
Yeah, we haven't actually received that money.
Well, but it was offered to you. But the point is, it was offered to you, and there was a lot of discussion that incentives were offered to get you to come here at the time. How important were those incentives for you to come to Texas? The incoming Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, said during his campaign that he thought we ought to get rid of all incentives, not mend them, end them. So what is your message to the Texas legislature as it relates to business incentives used to lure companies like SpaceX here?
Well, I mean, I think the way to look at it is more like you're like a landlord, you know, or you're like and you're looking for anchor tenants, and you're making decisions. You're trying to make a decision of like, if we bring this company or this facility to Texas, is it going to be a net gain for the state or is it not? Sometimes you'll be right about that, sometimes wrong.
Right.
It's important to structure any incentives such that it's a guaranteed win for the state. And in the case of the incentives for the Boca Chica facility, we have to repay those that money.
If you don't meet certain stated
Yes.
benchmarks.
Yes.
Related to job creation,
Yes.
economic impact,
Yes.
and all that.
And a lot of them are directly tied.
Right.
Directly tied. Like, so we create the job,
Right.
that then we get on a per job basis.
Would you
some
have
incentive.
come in the absence of incentives? There are a lot. The reason I asked Mr. Musk is
No, I think we would not have come.
there are a lot of people who view those kinds
No.
of incentives. The popular phrase these days is corporate welfare. There are a lot of people who say that we shouldn't be offering incentives to multi-billion-dollar companies to come to a place like Texas. That money could be better spent on people who need it.
No, we wouldn't have come because it would have been quite rude to not have offered incentives.
Okay, very good. I appreciate your candor. That's good. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. All right. Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
It's more like it's what I mean is that it's like a state has to show that it really wants a company to be there.
Right.
Ultimately, SpaceX will spend hundreds of millions of dollars on that facility, vastly in excess of what
the incentives would be.
of what the incentives would be.
Right.
So how much do the incentives really make a difference in in the grand scheme of things? Not that big of a difference, but it's sort of like you don't feel welcome. Like it doesn't feel like the state really cares unless it does something.
Right. They've got to have a little skin in the game.
There's got to be a little bit of skin in the game.
Right.
There's got to be some contribution.
Yep.
You know.
Got it.
That's really all
Okay.
it is.
Let's use the time we have left to ask some questions, and I know that the people who are keeping time for this will tell me to shut up when the time comes. First question: could the proposed Tesla bill in the legislature open up all direct car sales in Texas? In other words, would the bill apply to companies other than Tesla? And might this not be what the auto dealers fear? Not so much your direct car sales, but direct car sales that would not run through them by other companies.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, it's like I think when thinking about these things, you have to say what is right. Like what is the origin of this bill? Like why is there this restriction at all? And the restriction actually originates from when a bunch of the big car companies tried to get back their franchises and engaged in nefarious behavior to do that, particularly Ford under Jack Nasser. So they put all these pressure tactics on the car dealer, on the franchisees to sell the franchises back to the car company. And then the reaction from the franchisees, who had bought and paid for their franchises,
Right.
and who had invested all this money, their cause was just. And they went with their just cause to the legislature and said, look, if we have bought our franchise and we've invested our time and money to build this franchise, it is not right for the franchisor to then engage in pressure tactics to force us to sell it back to them at a fire sale price.
Right.
Obviously, that would be, so their cause was just, but now they're taking legislation that was meant for a just cause and applying it to an unjust cause, which is to say that a company that has never granted them a franchise must be forced to grant them a franchise. This is not right.
So would you be willing to stipulate, if this is what was driving the auto dealers crazy, the prospect that other companies would be selling direct, would you be willing to stipulate in your legislation that this was a Tesla-only bill, if that were even possible?
No, I don't think it should be a Tesla-only bill. That wouldn't be fair. It should be perhaps limited to new technology vehicles, or limited to a certain number of stores or something like that.
Right.
I don't think it should be just for Tesla.
Shouldn't only be for Tesla. A carve-out for Tesla.
It shouldn't be only for Tesla, but nor should it erode the franchise that they've bought and paid for and have put a lot of time into.
Got it.
That wouldn't be right either. So it should just be that if somebody hasn't granted them a franchise, they shouldn't be forced to grant them a franchise. It would be like if Apple came here and wanted to sell computers in the same legislations, they'd have to give out Apple franchise stores or something.
Right.
That wouldn't make any sense.
Well, the last question we're going to have time for is actually related to this, and that is to ask what has happened, in fact, in other states where Tesla has been allowed to sell directly. What has happened to the dealerships? Are the predictions of doom here, have they been manifested in other places?
No, basically in more than 40 out of 50 states, we sell cars. The dealers are doing fine. Nobody's, in trouble, or there's no terrible thing has happened to the dealers in any of the other states. And like I said, we currently sell in over 30 countries.
Right.
And these franchise restrictions don't exist in any of those countries, and the dealers are fine there too.
And the dealers are actually fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And there's plenty of examples where there are franchise restaurants and company-owned restaurants, or a mixture of franchise and company-owned. Like McDonald's has a mixture of company-owned, and they have mixture and franchise stores.
Yeah.
It works fine. So I think it's a pretty reasonable thing to ask that if we want to sell direct, that we have the right to do so, and that like I said, that consumers in Texas have the right to choose how they want to buy their car.
Right.
And I know we're running short on time, but there is one sort of announcement that I'd like to make.
Please make news. Go ahead. We'll make time.
This is the transportation forum.
Yes.
So we're going to create a Hyperloop test facility. So I don't know if people have read about this sort of. It's kind of a new mode of transport.
It's something that you rolled out on a white paper in 2013, right?
Yeah.
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 And it's a futuristic, that sometimes is negative, I don't mean it in that case, a futuristic way of going from point to point faster, safer, cheaper, immune to weather, earthquake resistant in the case of the California plan that was proposed. But it looks like a very futuristic way of doing this kind of travel.
Yeah, so in order to kind of help things along, we're going to create a Hyperloop test track.
You are?
Yeah, so something that's maybe on the order of a kind of 5 mile loop.
Please say it's going to be here.
Texas is the leading candidate.
It is?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. I'm liking you better already.
All right.
And so does the state have to promise not to be a jerk in order to get this business?
There's no quid pro quo here.
Okay.
But certainly it would be nice. It would be appreciated.
It would be nice, I bet. I bet. Okay.
But there's no.
When will all this go into production? The test facility will be begun production on that, or up and running when? What's the timetable?
Yeah, we're just figuring that out. So I just actually discussing it with some members of my team last night who are pretty excited about doing this.
How big a project is this? How much money are we talking about going into something like this?
I actually don't know, but we're not asking for any money from the state.
So it would be entirely funded. It would be entirely funded by you all.
Yeah.
Private, not private. Public, not public. All private funds.
Yeah. If somebody wants to chip in, I won't stop them.
Right.
But
this is not a stock offering, right up here on the stage, right? Yeah.
So, but no, this would be kind of a subscale track, and the thing we were talking about last night, it's not fully formed, we're just sort of figuring it out, is to have a test facility where different teams from university or even the little companies that people form could use this test track to kind of validate their ideas on designing the pod system within for the Hyperloop. But the test track is quite a sort of expensive capital item.
It is.
So if we can build the test track and then offer that for use by companies or teams of students to try out their pod design, and something that we might end up doing, or at least it sounded good last night after a couple of drinks, was
Your management style was okay with me.
shoot from the hip.
Yeah, right.
But there's this really awesome competition called Formula SAE,
Okay.
where students, engineering students work together to design and build a race car, and then they race it at the end of the season, and then whoever builds the best race car kind of wins.
Right. It's like an adult soapbox derby.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
But some of our best engineers have come from that program and really learned how to do great engineering as a result of that. And so I think it could be kind of fun to have some sort of Formula SAE thing for the Hyperloop.
For the pods.
Yeah, where people could compete, say, okay, who could make the pod go the fastest, and maybe compete on other dimensions.
Pretty great.
And I think that could be pretty fun.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk to the Formula SAE organizers and see if they think this would be good. And
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to repeat what you said. Texas is the leading candidate to get this facility.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's
It
a good
is.
place to. Let's get out of here before
All
he
right.
changes his mind. Right?
All
Okay.
right.
Elon
All
Musk, thank you very much. Thank you all very
All right.
much. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Musk. I
All right.
appreciate it. Very good. Okay.